Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today this is the last episode of the series where I'm teaching you guys how to build a CRUD application using React, GraphQL, and Node.js, which I really enjoyed this series, and finally we got to the last episode. So you can see what we've built so far is basically we have here a simple React frontend, and as you guys know, we're not focusing on UI or like if it's beautiful or not. We're just focusing on establishing a connection between a React client and a GraphQL server that we built. So you can see that we have here a GraphQL server. If I run the query get all users, it returns all the users in the database, and we can obviously like ask for more stuff over here. We can ask for the ID. It's working perfectly as like how GraphQL works, and we can add new people, right? We can now come over here and add someone like, let me add Michael. Let me put the username Michael 123. The password will be 12345. When I click create user, you see my page refreshes. This is because my page refreshed, and we also are showing like the users in the database here. We're making a query, and not only we have all the users we had before, but if I run this query again, now Michael appears in our database. So we established a connection between our client and our backend, so that's great. However, today we're actually gonna finish the CRUD by establishing how can we execute the other mutations we have in our server. So you can see that if we go to mutations, we have three mutations. We have the create user mutation, the update password mutation, and the delete user mutation. So we've done the create user one, which we're able to create a user in our React frontend. But now I'm gonna show you guys how to update your password and also how to delete the user, all done in our React frontend, right? So let's actually come over here and let's create the functionality to delete the user. So how are we gonna do that? Let's look over here. You can see that in our React application, we are obviously making a query and it displays each user in our database, right? So what I'm thinking is for each user, we're also going to display a button, which we can click on that button. And when we click on that button, the user is deleted from our database, or the mutation for delete user is executed. So how do we do that? Well, we can come here to the place where we tell to list our users, which is this over here. You can see we're fetching the data by using the useQuery hook from Apollo client, and we're displaying each user over here. But let's take a look at the query that we made, or at least at the mutation that we want to execute. You can see that when in the delete user mutation, it takes in an ID as an argument, meaning that we need to pass the ID of the user so that it knows who we're trying to delete, right? So let's keep that in mind, because what we can do is we can look at our GraphQL, our queries list over here, and you can see that we're actually not getting in the get all users, we're only getting the username and the name, but we need the ID. So I'm just going to add here that we also want the ID to be queried, right? So that's all we have to do to include the ID in the query. And then over here, inside of user, the user that we're mapping, we can access the ID, which is perfect because what we can do is we can come over here and create a button called delete user, and inside of here, we can have an on-click which will have access to the ID that, like the specific ID from this user. So what I like to do is I like to create a function called delete user, and we obviously need to pass this ID over here. So I'm just gonna create an anonymous function over here which calls this function, and obviously we haven't created this function yet, so let's create it right now. So const delete user, and this function will take an ID which will be a number. And I wrote number because this is obviously TypeScript, and I will also say that it will return void. If you're using JavaScript, then don't worry about this. But you can see that it says delete user, and it still has a red line because it expects an argument. So how do we pass the ID for each specific user to this function? Well, think about this. We're mapping through every user in the get all users returns, right? So all we have to do is we have to say that for each user specifically, the function will take as argument user.id, and then we'll know that this function over here will always take the correct ID as the argument. And now inside of here, what we can do is we have to find a way to execute a mutation, at least the mutation for delete user, right? So let's come over here to our GraphQL again inside of our React. I'll just close my server folder on the left so that we don't get confused with anything. This is the GraphQL mutation file. And you can see that we have here our create user mutation. So we'll just copy this and create another one called delete user. Delete user, and it will be pretty similar. I believe the function we called was delete user. Let me look here. I'll just open up the server again and look at mutations. No, it's actually not here. It's actually on the index.ts. You can see that the delete user is called delete user like this. So let's keep that in mind. I'll just close again the server folder over here, and you can see that on our delete user we can just write delete user, and we can write the arguments that it takes. So it actually takes an ID. So ID is equal to, so in GraphQL we actually have a type called ID, and if you recall in our mutation, if I open it up again, we actually said that we are accepting an ID of type GraphQL ID. So it's the same thing. It's how you actually call the GraphQL ID and using Apollo client. So we'll do it like this. We'll say that ID is of type ID, and then we delete all of this as well, and we just say ID is equal to money sign ID, and then we also need to change this to delete user. And now we can see that these are the arguments we can take. I believe that on the mutations folder, let me just keep this open, we're returning a message saying if it's either successful or like end a message, right? So delete worked. So let's just grab both of them. Let's grab successful and message, or actually I'll just grab the message so that if we need it, we can just see it. So we just created our mutation over here. Let's come to list of users and let's import this mutation. Let's go over here, import from /GraphQL/mutation, and let's grab the delete user mutation. And now what we can do is we can do very similar to what we did here with the create user. We'll just import the use mutation hook from Apollo client. I'll just import it here. Use mutation. I'll delete this, and then we'll just copy the same, like that. We'll just use the hook in our application. So I'll just say that we want to call the hook use mutation, and use the mutation delete user. And inside of here we want to create a function for that called delete user like this. Oh, I just realized we can't have the same name. So I'll just call this delete, right? I'll just call it delete. And let me put it over here. Oh, I can't call it delete. Okay. Execute delete, something like this. Okay. I'll just call it execute delete like this. And then we'll have delete user, and all we have to do is inside of here we can just call the delete user function with the ID. And obviously we could have actually, I just realized we could have actually just passed this over here, which would have been completely fine, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Sorry about that. We'll just pass execute delete and grab the user.id over here, and we can even delete this. So we don't even need to have that function. Oh, actually we need to pass the delete user over here. Yeah. So now that we have this done, we now have a button which should execute the query correctly. Let's check to see if this is working. Let's open this up. You can see that each user has a delete button next to them, and you can see that when I refresh the page, when I call the query, we have this user in the database. If I click to delete Jack, we got a response not successful. Interesting. Let's see what happened. Okay guys, so I just figured out the mistake. It was actually a pretty dumb mistake because I taught you guys how to do this correctly in the last video. But basically when you have a mutation like this and we want to pass the variables, we don't pass it directly like this. We actually have to do something like opening an object, passing the variables, and then inside of here we pass each variable individually. Like we're going to pass the ID. We can just say ID is equal to user.id. And I hope this works. This is saying basically we want to call the delete user mutation and delete it based on the ID like this. So if you come over here and we refresh our page, I was just debugging and I want to delete Jack. You can see that when I click on this, no errors appear. I'm going to refresh the page, Jack disappears. Let's run this query. You can see that Jack was here. If I run this query again, Jack isn't here anymore. If I want to delete Michael, you can see same thing happens. When I click on the button, the ID is passed as the variable and it works correctly. So we are now able to delete all users, or delete some users, right? So now let's actually move into the part where we're going to be able to update the password, because that's actually interesting. If we take a look at the mutation, you can see that it's actually over here. Yeah, it's over here. So update password, as you can see, it takes 3 arguments. The username that you want to update, then the old password, then the new password that you want to that you want to have, and then inside of here it basically checks to see if the new, like if there's someone with that username in the database. Then it checks if the password in the database is equal to the old password that you passed in the argument, to see if you're correctly the same person, if you're authenticated almost. And then it changes that password to the new password that you input. So to do that, we're actually going to create a different component in our front end. I'll just come over here, create a different component called update password. And over here, what we can do is we can actually just say RFCE, and it will create the whole component for us. And inside of here, we just want to create 3 inputs, right? We're not caring that much about UI, so we'll just say input of type text, and I'll put a placeholder here. This placeholder will be username, and let me just close this input, and I'll just copy this a couple of times like this, and okay, that's fine. So what we want is basically both of this will be password, obviously because we want to have those as password, and then this will be current password, and this will be new password. So the old password and the password we want it to be changed, right? So, and over here at the bottom we can just say create a button saying something like update password. Update password. Now that we have this beautiful component with 0 styling, let's import it to our how can I say, to our app.tsx, right? I'll just come over here and literally just say update password like this, and it will automatically import the component at the top. And now if we come over here, you'll see that in our React application, it should display, yeah, it displays right below the users, but it displays here the username, the current password, and the new password fields, and also the button saying update password. Now, how do we make this work? Well, we can come here to the update password, and let's think about this. We want to be able to keep track of the username, the current password, and the new password, similar to how we did with creating the user. So what we can do is we can just create 3 different states over here, and I'll import the use state hook, and we can create 3 different states, one for the username, and set username like this. It's going to be equal to use state, and it's going to be a string, and one for the old password or the current password, and one for the new password, something like this. Current password, set current password like this, and I'll just make it like this, and one for the new password, and I'll just copy this as well like this. Set new password. Okay, so basically we have 3 states, and we want to, like, whenever we rewrite on the username input, we want to pass an onChange event, which takes in a function that brings event, and this function just sets username equal to event.target.value. We've done this before. This is how we're going to grab the inputs, whatever we write on the inputs, right? And I'll just copy this and paste it on the other 2, and then just change them to satisfy the other 2 states. So set current password for this one, and set new password for this one as well. So now we have our states. They're beautifully written over here. We can have access to them. Now what do? Well, we just do the same thing we did before. We just create the mutation. We come to our GraphQL mutation file inside of the React, and we just paste it over here. And now we create a mutation called update user. And over here we need to take into account that this function, or not update user, it should be update password like this. And we should take into account that the name of the function, if I recall, is update password, right? Update password like this. And let's think about what are the arguments that we want. We want username. We want I believe we called it old password. Let's take a look at the, yeah, we called it old password, and in my front end I called it current password, which it's the same thing. Don't feel confused about it, sorry about that, but we called it old password as part of the arguments in the update password mutation, so we have to call it that as well over here. We just call it old password like this. And then we also need to pass the new password, and all of them are going to be strings, so that's completely fine. So now that we have this done, we want to pass obviously the same things over here as arguments. So username is equal to the username that we created above. Old password is equal to the old password that we created above. And new password, like this, is equal to the new password that we defined above. So new password is equal to new password, like this. And then out of this, if we look at the mutation, you can see that we can get a bunch of stuff. We can actually return a message. We can return some errors. I'll grab the message. So I'll just say something like message if we want to see them. We're not going to deal with this, but if you want to see the messages, deal with error handling, you can just grab them from the request. And now that we have this update password thing over here, we can import this at the top. So I'll just say something like import from / GraphQL / mutation, and we can grab the update password from it. And then inside of here, we can again do the same thing we did before. We can call from Apollo client, so import from Apollo client. We want to import the use mutation hook, use mutation, and then inside of here we call this mutation, so this hook, right? So we say const equal to use mutation, and we pass the update password, and then over here we have to call the function. We're going to call it update password, and we can grab again errors if we want to deal with errors, but I'm just leaving this because this is the standard. And we have now our update password function, and we have our 3 different states. So what do? Well, we just come here to our update password function, or button, and we pass an onClick event, which carries a function, like over here, it calls a function. And this function will be the update password function, update password. And inside of it, we can pass, again, variables. And the variables we're going to pass are the username, which is going to be equal to username, like the state username. Then, let me just delete this. Then we want to also pass an old password, which is going to be equal to current password. That's how we called it in our front end. And then we need to pass a new password as an argument, which is equal to new password, like this. And now we have our 3 states being passed as arguments to this mutation. Now that we have this kind of done over here, we can actually check to see if this is working. Let's run our front end over here. Let's run our queries. You see that the users we have right now are PedroTech, and let's actually change it for James. So the username for James is James123, and the password is random password. I'm going to change that to please subscribe. So let's come over here and say James123, that's the username. The current password is random, let me make sure I write this right, random password. The new password must be please subscribe. And when I click update password, it didn't work out. Let me see what happened. Oh, okay guys, so I just figured out the error. I forgot to change this over here from create user to update password. It was a dumb mistake, but like we all go through this. I changed it to update password, so let's do this again. Let me refresh this page. Let's say James123 because that's the username. Then the password is random password, like this, and I want to change it to please subscribe. When I click update password, it seemed like it worked. Nothing happened, but it seems like it worked. Now let's query all users in our server, and let's see if this changed to please subscribe. And as you can see, it worked perfectly. It says please subscribe. And one of the cool things is we can just, since we're getting this back, we can do some like cool stuff. Like, for example, I can come here to my update password, and I can get the data from this. So, or the error. So we got the error, right? What we can do is we can say that if there's any error, then we just want to return like a UI saying, like something, an H1 saying the error. Let's try to see if this works. If there's any errors, we just want to ignore the rest and return this. So let's try to update a password with wrong information. Let's see what happens. You can see it broke, right? It said it threw some errors saying username doesn't exist. We try to update for a user that doesn't exist. Now let's try to update for James and pass a password that isn't correct. you'll see that it will show passwords do not match. So our errors are being correctly collected in our front end, and we can deal with them however we want. But again, this is not the focus of the video. So this is basically it for the series. Actually, we are now able to basically execute every single aspect of a CRUD in our React frontend with our GraphQL server. So that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this series because I really enjoyed making it. I love using this kind of technologies. Those are the technologies that I use in any side projects. So I would really appreciate if you guys could leave a like, comment down below what you want to see next. Also subscribe because I'm posting 3 times a week, and it's been a lot of work trying to I don't know, balance everything, like YouTube, university, everything together. So I've been putting a lot of work into this, and if you could just leave a like, it would definitely help the algorithm with my channel. It's gonna help my channel grow, so I would really appreciate it. So that's basically it. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next, and I see you guys next time.